Hi. Last time we had created a video demonstrating how to generate the PHP code to keep track of a web page counter, and we were using ChatGPT to assist us. So that was part one of this two-part series focusing on web page counters. And now for part two. So in part one, we were just keeping track of the number of pages. And so if you just visit a page and you just reload the page 5 times, that'll count for 5. So you'd add the counter, add 5 to the counter. But what we want to do now is count unique visitors, meaning if you go and you, for the same IP address, basically the same computer, that's not always the case. If you visit the page 100 times, it'll still just be counted 1. It's just counting the visitors, not the number of hits to the page. So normally the way you would do this is you just keep track of all the IP addresses in a table or a SQL table or whatever database you're using. And if somebody comes along and it's a brand new IP address, you add it. And if it's not, you don't add it. And then when a person visits the page, you just count the number of rows in that table. And so that's the way ChatGPT is going to do it. It's going to do all the syntax for us. So you're going to find it's going to be a lot quicker. So let me show you. So I had already done some of this. Let me show you. I'll first show you the conversation I had with ChatGPT. And I think is it this one? Yes. So this was, and previously I'd asked it, and I think I still have that up there. Can you write the PHP SQL code to create a web page counter? Went and did it, and that was fine. Managed to implement that. And then I asked it, part two, can you write a similar PHP SQL solution that only counts unique visitors to a web page? That's all I gave it, and it totally understood what I wanted. So here's its answer, and this is what it generated. And I already copied and pasted that into my code. And then it gave us a little bit of instructions, which is actually kind of self-evident. We need a database table called unique visitors and a column called IP address. That's the one it's going to be comparing against to see if it's a new IP address. And when a user visits the page, that IP address is checked against the database, determine if they're a unique visitor. If they are, their IP address is added to the unique visitors table. So I went ahead and I created that table. And I also put in the code. So let me show you I'll show you the code. This is the code for that very same web page we've been doing. That was the old code. I'm keeping that because I still want that. But this is the new code. And again, it's using all functions. So function is unique visitor. Make sure you're able to see this. Yes, so function is unique visitor. Passes the IP address. It does a select to see if it's there. If it gets more than 0 rows, it returns false. Otherwise, it's a unique visitor, returns true. So this is a function. You pass it the connection and the IP address, and it returns a Boolean, either true or false. And here's another function, add unique visitor. You also pass it the same parameters, the connection, the IP address. You've already determined it, so you're going to add it. So you do an insert. It's just the SQL command into the table with that IP address. And that's the value. That's the field name, and that's the value. And then it just checks to see if it was added successfully. And then finally, a function to retrieve the count. It's just going to count everything on the table. That's all this is doing, select count. And then it just goes and it takes the result from that, turns it into an associative array. That's what that fetch associative does. And then That's so you can access these fields, this information by field names. It's kind of like JSON, sort of. So this returns the row, for that row, the value associated with count, which there's not going to be that much in that associative array. But anyway, that's what it returns. And that's coming from result. So then finally, so those are the functions that it's defined. And this is the actual code. This is like server. That's like a predefined constant with the server that will get the IP address. And then it simply goes, it calls these functions. If it's a unique visitor, add it. Otherwise, it does nothing. In here, it's just retrieving the count of the unique visitors, finally closing the database. And then I just took that unique visitor count as I did before. I put it down here as another line. Now, when I did this, I ran into an error, and I'll show you what the error I ran into was. When I copied the code verbatim, it's not a big deal, but here's what happened. Here's my web page, so I'll reload it. Trying to get property number rows of non-object in line 103. Very cryptic error message. Let's go back and look at the code. Number rows in line 103. It says this object is null. Usually it's somewhere further back that's producing that. Why would that be null? Usually the reason is there's something wrong with the select. Because everything else, the syntax is right. And sure enough, if you stare at it long enough, I never defined a field called ID. Now, maybe in some installations that would be automatic, but all I have is IP address. So that's certainly not going to work. What I'm going to do is just change that to an asterisk, which means just select everything that's defined. That way I'm not giving it any names, so I can't get myself in any trouble. And I'll save that. And now I'll go back to the page. There's the page. And there you go. So it's been visited 20 times, unique visitors 5. Let me reload it, load it. 21 times, still unique visitors 5. So it's just keeping track of the number of unique visitors. As I reload it, as I expected, it's not. The number isn't going up. That second number isn't going up. And that's it. I'm going to stop sharing there. And as you can see, it definitely went a lot faster than if we had done this by hand. Generating all that code, you'd have to wait for me to type it all out, and I'd have to explain every gruesome detail of the syntax. And the syntax is built into this bot, so there's really not a lot of reason. You have to know the logic in many cases, but you don't really have to know that much about the syntax. So that was part 2, and that completes the series, unless I get ambitious and I do a part 3, which might consist of like using cookies to count uniqueness. So a cookie is something that the browser puts on your machine without you knowing it. A lot of times you'll see a little pop-up where you have to give it permission. And the cookie keeps track of, identifies you as a unique machine. So that's maybe in some cases a better way to keep track of unique visitors. Because I said the flaw in this approach is that people who have ISPs often they're like logging into their ISP when they turn on their computer in the morning, and it's dynamically assigning an IP address, and each time it might assign a different one, and then you don't really get unique visitors. So, but anyway, it was interesting to see what ChatGPT would do, and I hope you found it interesting as well, and having a better idea what you can do and can't do in collaborating with it. So thanks for watching, and have a nice day or a nice evening, as the case may be.